the Dominion thought they had won. On the barren, dust-choked moon of Vedra, the alien legions spread like locusts across the shattered cities. The sky was thick with ash, the ground torn by the scars of bombardment. Their general, Varnik of the Seventh Spire, stood tall upon the ruins of a human stronghold, his four eyes gleaming with triumph. "Send the signal," he commanded. His voice boomed through the calms. "The last embers of humanity's resistance are nearly extinguished. Summon the fleets. We will finish them here." The Dominion always called for backup at the end of a war. It was not necessity, it was tradition. Reinforcements arrived not to fight, but to witness victory and share in the spoils. For centuries, this had been the way. Empires fell, and the Dominion feasted. Varnik thought this battle would be no different. He was wrong. The signal raced through the stars, carried on subspace bands that cut across half the galaxy. It echoed in outposts, across relay stations, through the great void itself. Somewhere, far away, the Dominion fleet stirred, preparing to descend upon Vedra and crush what little remained of humanity's defense. But the signal did not go unnoticed. On Earth, scarred, dangerous Earth, deep within its mountains and oceans, something stirred. Long before the Dominion had risen, humans had built things the galaxy had forgotten. Vaults. Engines. Weapons sealed away from their own kind, locked behind codes that only awakened when Earth itself was threatened. The signal had awakened them. Earth's hidden defenders, those the galaxy had long whispered about but never truly seen, had awoken. They were not diplomats. They were not soldiers in polished armor. They were Deathworlders, children of a planet that killed the weak and forged the strong into predators. The first sign of trouble came before the Dominion fleets could even arrive. Varnik stood on the command bridge of his flagship, the Iron Spear, when his tactical officer spoke. "General, multiple unknown contacts have entered the system. Fast movers. Non-Dominion signatures." Varnik frowned. "Humans? Impossible. Their fleets are scattered. Identify." The officer's voice trembled. "General, they're small craft. Living craft. Some organic. Some mechanical. They move as if." The ship shuddered violently as alarms screamed. A Dominion cruiser, orbiting nearby, split open in a spray of fire and twisted metal. Its reactor went critical before anyone could react, turning it into a sunburst across the void. On the debris scanner, the culprits were visible, tiny spear-like vessels darting through space at impossible speeds. They didn't fly in formation. They didn't follow predictable tactics. They hunted, darting, slashing, vanishing into the black. Like predators. On the surface, Dominion troops began to vanish. Patrols failed to report back. Communication relays went dark. At first, Varnik assumed it was the last human resistance fighting back. But when the bodies of his soldiers were found, mutilated in ways no human weapons could achieve, the truth was clear. Something else was here. Reports flooded in. Troops were dragged into shadows by creatures with armor like living stone. Skies filled with swarms of winged machines that screamed like banshees before diving onto vehicles and tearing them apart. Dominion soldiers, hardened veterans of countless wars, began to whisper the forbidden word. Deathworlders. The reinforcements finally arrived, weeks later. 3 Dominion fleets descended upon Vedra, grand armadas of battleships and dreadnoughts, their hulls gleaming with the Dominion's sigils of conquest. Each fleet was strong enough to crush a planet's defenses. Together, they were unstoppable. Or so they thought. The fleets emerged from warp expecting a triumph. Instead, they arrived into chaos. Half of Varnik's occupation forces were already gone. Orbit was littered with burning wreckage. And circling above the moon were the Deathworlders, an armada unlike anything the Dominion had ever seen. They weren't uniform. Some ships were forged of black iron, bristling with strange weapons. Others looked alive, grown from bone and sinew, pulsing with bioluminescence. There were even smaller craft that looked more like birds of prey than starships. And they moved not like fleets, but like predators circling prey. The battle began the moment the Dominion dropped out of warp. The Dominion's dreadnoughts unleashed their full arsenal. Plasma lances tore across the void, missile swarms blotted out the stars, and energy shields flared like miniature suns. For a moment, the sky was filled with fire. But the Deathworlders did not fight like other species. They didn't form neat defensive lines. They didn't sacrifice ships for formations. They struck from angles the Dominion didn't even think possible. A Dominion carrier launched a wave of fighters, only for the fighters to be torn apart by swarms of organic craft that latched onto them like parasites and ripped them open. A dreadnought turned its massive guns toward the Deathworld flagship, a hulking vessel carved from the skeleton of something colossal. The dreadnought fired. The flagship simply shifted, its hull rippling like muscle, absorbing the impact and then spat the energy back in a concentrated beam that cut the dreadnought in half. The Dominion panicked. For the first time in centuries, their fleets weren't winning. They were being hunted. On the ground, General Varnick fought to rally what remained of his legions. But the Deathworlders had already arrived. They came in many forms. Some were humans, clad in armor woven from the hides of Earth's most dangerous beasts. Others were creatures, engineered from the deadliest predators of Earth's jungles, deserts, and seas. And some were hybrids, half human, half weapon, eyes glowing with unnatural fire. They did not march. They stalked. They did not fight battles. They waged hunts. Dominion tanks were buried under avalanches triggered by humans who moved through the mountains like ghosts. Soldiers were picked off one by one in the dark, their bodies left hanging as warnings. Command centers were overrun not by armies, but by small packs of humans who moved faster and hit harder than anything the Dominion had trained for. The Dominion had expected prey. What they found were predators older and more ruthless than themselves. When the last Dominion fleet broke, fleeing into the void, Varnick finally understood the mistake. The call for backup had not brought salvation. It had not brought witnesses to victory. It had brought Deathworlders. And the galaxy would remember. The trap had been set. High above the human colony of Rhydon, the alien council armada held orbit. Their fleet, gleaming cruisers and towering battleships, blotted out the sun with their sheer numbers. On the surface, cities burned. Colonists screamed as Dominion-aligned shock troops swept through streets, dragging survivors into camps. But this wasn't just conquest. It was bait. The Council wanted humanity broken in one decisive strike. They knew humans could endure too well. Every time they pushed humanity, Earth responded with fire. So this time, they would lure them into the open. Council commanders deliberately transmitted a distress beacon, broadcasting on human-coded frequencies. To human ears, it would sound like a desperate plea from Rhydon's colonies: "We are under attack, send aid immediately." The Council sat back with cold smiles. Humans, sentimental and stubborn, could never ignore a cry for help. When their ragged defenders arrived, the Council would crush them in front of their own people. The galaxy would see humanity fall. Or so they believed. The signal did reach Earth. But the response wasn't what the Council expected. The humans who heard it weren't the Navy. They weren't diplomats or politicians. They were the Deathworld legions. On Earth, classified by the Council as a Class 12 Deathworld, life had never been gentle. Every storm, every creature, every disease had shaped its people into survivors. Humanity's official fleets were brave, yes, but the legions were something else entirely. They were those born from the deadliest corners of the planet, warriors raised in radiation zones, deserts where the air itself killed, jungles that swallowed armies whole. These weren't soldiers in gleaming uniforms. They were predators in human skin. And when they heard the Council's distress call, they didn't hesitate. They didn't ask for orders. They answered. The Council fleets orbited Rhydon confidently, their commanders exchanging boasts. "How long do you think until the humans crawl to their doom?" one asked. "Perhaps a week," another said with a laugh. Their desperation always betrays them. It is their weakness. But their laughter faded when the first human ships arrived. They were not the clumsy, underpowered frigates the Council expected. The Deathworlder ships were angular, scarred, and armed with weapons the galaxy had outlawed millennia ago. Some were experimental craft, never meant to leave Earth's atmosphere. Others were patchwork, forged from salvaged Dominion tech twisted into something deadlier. And many weren't even ships in the conventional sense, they were predators that flew. The legions didn't arrive in formation. They came like a storm, scattered across the void, striking from all directions at once. The Council responded with discipline. Formations locked into place, shields flared, and volleys of plasma lit up space. A dozen human ships were obliterated in the opening minutes. But the Deathworlders didn't retreat. They adapted. One ship, little more than a dagger-shaped hulk, drove itself directly into the side of a Council battleship, detonating with enough force to tear a hole through its hull. Another unleashed a swarm of drones that weren't mechanical at all but living organisms, each one latching onto enemy vessels and chewing through armor like acid. Council admirals gave desperate orders. But the legions weren't fighting a fleet battle. They were hunting. On the ground, the Council's trap unraveled even faster. Rhydon's surface had been secured, or so they thought. Yet as their soldiers marched colonists into holding camps, the Deathworlders descended. Drop pods slammed into the surface, not the neat, orderly troop carriers of Council armies, but brutal spikes of iron and bone. They didn't land, they pierced. And out of them came the legions. They were not uniform. Some wore armor scavenged from fallen enemies, decorated with teeth and bones. Others carried weapons that looked grown rather than forged rifles that hissed and pulsed like living beasts. And their eyes burned with a cold, merciless fire. They didn't march in lines. They scattered into shadows, moving with terrifying speed. Council troops fought bravely at first, but their training failed against predators who didn't play by the rules of war. Tanks were buried in mudslides triggered by carefully placed charges. Supply lines were cut by small packs of Deathworlders who seemed to appear and vanish at will. Entire squads went missing, their corpses later found strung up like trophies. The Council had expected to break humanity's spirit. Instead, their soldiers were the ones whispering in fear. Above Rhydon, the battle turned into slaughter. The Council armada still outnumbered the humans 3-1, but numbers didn't matter. The Deathworlders treated the void like another hunting ground. Their ships used slingshot maneuvers through asteroid fields the Council wouldn't dare enter. They turned derelicts into traps, luring Council ships into ambushes. And when their ships were destroyed, the Deathworlders didn't care. They wanted to get close. Boarding pods launched from wreckage, slamming into Council vessels. Within minutes, entire crews were overrun by screaming Deathworld soldiers armed with blades and plasma cutters, tearing through corridors with savage precision. One Council captain tried to surrender his ship. The response came cold and simple. "We're not here for prisoners." Moments later, his command deck was breached, and silence followed. Admiral Tyros, commander of the Council fleet, watched in disbelief as his battle map bled red. Entire wings gone. Capital ships burning. Ground forces collapsing. This was supposed to be their end, he whispered. This was supposed to. The calms cut him off. A Deathworlder voice broke through, rough and mocking. "You wanted us in the open," the voice growled. "You wanted to see humanity fall?" Static crackled. Then came the final words. "Now you'll see what happens when predators are baited." The trap the Council had built for humanity had become their own grave. By the third day, the armada was broken. By the fifth, the ground forces had been exterminated. By the seventh, the survivors were fleeing across the stars, carrying tales of horror back to the Council worlds. But the damage was done. The galaxy now knew. Humans weren't prey. They weren't fragile colonists clinging to the edges of survival. They were Deathworlders, creatures forged by the harshest world known to intelligent life. And when baited into war, they didn't come as victims. They came as predators. And predators don't share the kill. The Krell Empire believed the war was already over. Their fleets had swept through the colonies on the rim like fire through dry grass. Planet after planet fell, their defenders crushed beneath the weight of Krell war machines. And now, at last, they had reached Res, one of humanity's most promising outposts. The invasion was swift. Cities burned within hours. Resistance crumbled. Survivors were rounded up like cattle. General Karan, commander of the Krell armies, stood atop the ruins of Res's capital tower. The red sun painted the horizon with blood. Around him, Krell banners rose where human flags once stood. "Send the signal," he ordered, his mandibles clicking with pride. "Tell the fleets to prepare for harvest. Victory is near." The message went out, a proud call across the stars, summoning reinforcements to secure their triumph. But the signal carried farther than the Krell intended. Far away, on Earth, ancient machines stirred. Deep under mountains and oceans, long-sealed vaults lit up for the first time in centuries. Old codes, written in languages the galaxy had forgotten, awoke. In the darkness, weapons whispered back to life. The call of war had been heard by those Earth had hidden away, the Deathworlders. They were not the polished fleets of Earth's official navy. They were something older, something far more dangerous. They were warriors born of the most merciless corners of the planet, survivors of jungles, deserts, frozen tundras, and irradiated wastelands. The galaxy had long classified Earth as forbidden, a Class 12 death world where life itself was an enemy. What few understood was that the planet's cruelty had not just shaped beasts. It had shaped its people. And now, those people were awake. The Krell first noticed when their supply convoys began vanishing. A fleet of transports sent to deliver food and weapons never arrived. Patrols searching for them found only wreckage, hulls torn apart, cargo scattered, crew ripped from within their ships. The black boxes contained only fragments of screams and the sounds of things moving in the dark. General Karan dismissed it as human guerrillas at first. "They are desperate," he sneered. "Rats scurrying through the ruins." But then, larger ships began to fall. A Krell destroyer, orbiting Res, was struck from below by something that tore through its shields like paper. Survivors spoke of shapes moving faster than sensors could track, hunters that struck once, then vanished into the void. The Krell had fought humans before. They knew their fleets, underpowered, outdated, fragile. But these new ships were different. They looked grown, not built. Some pulsed with veins of light, like living creatures. Others bore scars, crude plating, and weapons the Krell had outlawed ages ago. And they never attacked in fleets. They attacked like packs of predators. On the surface of Res, terror spread faster than fire. Krell patrols disappeared into the night. Entire regiments failed to report back. Outposts were found abandoned, their soldiers' weapons piled neatly as if mocking their defeat. Whispers spread through the camps. "They move in the dark. They bleed like us, but they don't die like us. Deathworlders." At first, General Karan laughed. "Fairy tales," he said. "Superstition." Until he saw them himself. The Deathworlders came without warning. One night, as Krell soldiers slept in their fortified camps, the ground shook. At first they thought it was artillery. Then the shadows moved. Humans, but not like any Karan had fought before, poured from the forests. Their armor was a patchwork of iron, bone, and living tissue. Their weapons spat fire and plasma, some screeching like beasts when they discharged. They did not fight in lines. They did not march. They swarmed, fast and merciless, striking from every angle. Karan watched as one of his tanks turned its cannon toward the attackers, only for a Deathworlder to leap atop it, rip open the hatch, and drag the crew out screaming. Another squad vanished into smoke as their own ammunition depot exploded, set off by infiltrators who had slipped past every sensor. These were not soldiers. They were predators unleashed. The Krell fleets above Res fared no better. When reinforcements arrived 100 warships strong, they expected to see victory. Instead, they found chaos. Orbit was littered with Krell wreckage, burning silently against the black. The Deathworlders were waiting. They didn't engage in formation battles. They ambushed. They feinted. They led Krell ships into asteroid fields, then turned the rocks themselves into weapons. They disabled engines, boarded vessels, and butchered crews hand to hand. A Krell captain described it in his final log. They do not fight wars. They hunt. We are not enemies to them. We are prey. General Koran grew desperate. He called for more fleets. More soldiers. More weapons. But every signal he sent was met with silence. For the Deathworlders had already learned how to cut their communications. They jammed signals, hijacked channels, and sent false orders. Entire Krell fleets were lured into dead systems, never to return. Reinforcements never came. Only silence followed his calls. On the final day, the Deathworlders came for Koran himself. His command tower was surrounded. Krell soldiers fought bravely, but their weapons barely slowed the humans. They moved through gunfire like wolves through snow, relentless, coordinated, merciless. Koran tried to flee, but they were already inside. A blast tore open the command deck, and smoke poured in. Out of it stepped a Deathworlder. His armor was scarred, his weapon dripping with alien blood. His eyes burned with something Koran had never seen in humans before. Hatred was familiar. Defiance too. But this was hunger. Your mistake, the Deathworlder said in a voice like gravel, was calling for backup. Koran's mandibles trembled. What are you? The Deathworlder smiled without warmth. Earth. The blade fell. The Krell Empire never recovered from Res. Its fleets scattered. Its colonies revolted. Its generals whispered of shadows that stalked their soldiers, of predators that wore human skin. And across the galaxy, one truth spread faster than fire. Never call for reinforcements against Earth. Because the only thing that will answer is silence.